Exhaustion and terrible wages had finally pushed Adelaide past the point of fear. So when the city's most terrifying man pointed a loaded Glock at her chest, she simply wiped the spilled coffee from her stained apron. "Shout at me again," she hissed, completely out of patience, "and I'll end you." His reaction defied all belief. The neon sign outside Gina's all-day breakfast flickered with a persistent, annoying buzz, casting a sickly pink glow over the rain-slicked pavement of 9th Avenue. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale grease, burned filter coffee, and the quiet desperation of a 3 a.m. Tuesday shift in Hell's Kitchen. Adelaide Callahan leaned heavily against the laminate counter, rubbing the back of her neck. At 28 years old, and proudly wearing 280 pounds on her 5'7" frame, Bear was a woman who took up space in a world that constantly demanded she shrink. Her feet, crammed into orthotic work shoes, throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. Her pink uniform was tight across her broad shoulders and wide hips, stained with the remnants of an 8-hour shift that had inexplicably morphed into a double. She was tired, her lower back was screaming, and she was in no mood for nonsense. The bell above the door didn't just jingle, it shattered the quiet. The cold night air rushed in, bringing with it 3 men who carried an aura of absolute violence. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. The 2 men flanking the leader were built like brick walls, their eyes scanning the empty diner with the practiced paranoia of apex predators. But it was the man in the center who sucked the oxygen out of the room. Maximilian Rossetti. Even Bear, who made it a point to mind her own business and stay out of the local gossip, knew who he was. The Rossetti family ran the docks, the local unions, and half the underground casinos in the tri-state area. Maximilian was the underboss, a man whose tailored Italian suits barely concealed the savage brutality that had earned him his reputation. Rumor had it he had personally buried 2 rival gang members alive under the fresh concrete of the new Hudson Yards development. He was tall, rigidly imposing, with dark eyes that looked like they had never seen a joke, let alone laughed at one. Gina, the diner's owner, was usually asleep in the back office, leaving B to manage the graveyard shift. Right now, B thanked God Gina wasn't out here. The older woman would have fainted. Maximilian didn't wait to be seated. He walked straight to the largest corner booth, the one with the ripped red leather, and slid in. His men took the adjacent booths, sitting facing the door. B took a deep breath, grabbed a fresh order pad, and walked over. She didn't scurry. She didn't coo. She just lumbered over with the heavy, deliberate steps of a woman whose feet felt like they were walking on glass. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice flat, offering neither a smile nor a tremble. Maximilian didn't look up from his phone. "Black coffee. A steak, rare. If it's cooked past breathing, I'll have my men burn this place to the ground." His voice was low, gravelly, and laced with an arrogant dismissal that immediately made B's blood pressure spike. "1 rare steak. Coffee," B muttered, turning on her heel. 10 minutes later, she returned carrying a tray. She placed the thick white ceramic mug of black coffee on the table. As she reached over to set down the plate with the steak, one of Maximilian's massive bodyguards suddenly shifted in his seat, knocking his heavy elbow hard into B's hip. The impact threw B off balance. Her heavy frame twisted awkwardly, and the tray dipped. The mug of scalding hot coffee tipped over, spilling a dark, steaming puddle across the table, splashing directly onto the sleeve of Maximilian Rossetti's $3,000 suit. Silence fell over the diner. It was absolute, suffocating silence. Maximilian slowly lowered his phone. He looked at the brown stain spreading across his pristine grey cuff, and then his dark, furious eyes slowly drifted up to meet B's. "You stupid, clumsy cow!" Maximilian roared, his voice echoing off the cheap tin ceiling. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the silverware. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? It costs more than you make in 5 years, slinging hash in this dumpster." B stood there, the empty tray hanging from her hand. The bodyguard who had bumped her was already reaching inside his jacket, a cruel smirk on his face. Maximilian stood up, towering over her. He jabbed a finger hard into her collarbone. "Look at you. You're pathetic. Get down on your knees and clean this up right now, or I swear to God I will have you cut into so many pieces they won't be able to fit you in a standard casket." The adrenaline hit B's system like a freight train. It wasn't fear that coursed through her veins. It was a lifetime of rage. A lifetime of being mocked for her size, overlooked, underpaid, and treated like dirt by men who thought the world belonged to them. Her aching back, her throbbing feet, the rent she couldn't pay, the sheer disrespect, it all coalesced into a blinding white heat. B didn't back down. She stepped forward. She was a big woman, and she used every ounce of her imposing mass to close the distance between them until she was inches from the Mafia Boss's face. "Listen to me, you arrogant prick," Bay hissed, her voice vibrating with a terrifying, unhinged calm. The bodyguard pulled his gun, aiming it directly at B's head. Maximilian held up a hand, stopping his man, his eyes locked onto B in sudden, stunned disbelief. "I have been on my feet for 16 hours, Bea continued, her voice rising in volume and intensity. "My feet are bleeding, my back is killing me. I just served you a $20 steak that you're treating like a Michelin star meal. Your gorilla over there bumped into me. So you're going to sit your tailored ass back down, and you are going to wait quietly while I get a rag." Maximilian opened his mouth to speak, a vein throbbing dangerously in his neck. B leaned in closer, pointing her thick, calloused finger right between his eyes. "Shout at me again, and I'll end you. I will take this steak knife, and I will show you exactly how I carve up a pig. Do we understand each other?" For a full 10 seconds, the diner was paralyzed. The hum of the neon sign was the only sound in the world. Maximilian Rossetti, the monster of Hell's Kitchen, was staring into the furious, bloodshot eyes of a 280-pound waitress holding a plastic serving tray like a shield. Then something bizarre happened. The tight, furious muscles around Maximilian's mouth twitched. A low, dark sound rumbled in his chest. It took Bear a second to realize what it was. He was laughing. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a dark, dangerous chuckle that made the hair on B's arms stand up. Maximilian slowly sat back down in the booth. He looked at her, really looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her flushed face, her stained apron, her defiant posture. "Bring the rag," he said softly. The rage was gone, replaced by a predatory fascination. And another coffee. B glared at him for a second longer, refusing to be the first to look away, before turning and marching back to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely pour the fresh coffee. "I am a dead woman," she thought. "He's going to wait until I get off shift, and he's going to kill me." But when she returned to the table with the rag and the coffee, Maximilian didn't say a word. He ate his steak in silence. When he finally stood up to leave, he walked past her, pausing just long enough to lean down near her ear. He smelled of expensive cologne, rain, and gunpowder. "You've got a lot of nerve, Adelaide," he whispered, reading her name tag. "I like nerve." He walked out the door, his men following like shadows. When Bea turned back to the table to clear it, she froze. Sitting in the center of the table, perfectly folded, was a stack of crisp $100 bills, 10 of them, $1,000, and beneath them, written on a napkin in elegant, sweeping ink, was a single sentence: "See you soon." For 3 agonizing days, Adelaide waited for the other shoe to drop. Every time a dark car drove slowly past her cramped third-floor walk-up in Queens, her heart leaped into her throat. Every time the diner bell chimed during her shift, she braced herself for a bullet. But nothing happened. Gina, who Bea eventually confessed the incident to, had practically wept in terror, begging Bea to flee the state. But Bea had a mother in an assisted living facility in Brooklyn to pay for. She couldn't run, and a stubborn, prideful part of her refused to let a mobster chase her out of her own life. By Thursday evening, the torrential New York rain had returned. Bea finished her shift, wrapped her oversized waterproof coat around her bulky frame, and stepped out onto the slick sidewalk to walk to the subway. She didn't make it to the corner. A sleek, black Cadillac Escalade glided silently to the curb, cutting off her path. The back door popped open. Out stepped Carlo, the bodyguard who had bumped her table 3 nights ago. He didn't draw a weapon, but his posture made it clear that running wasn't an option. "Get in, Adelaide," Carlo said gruffly. "I'm taking the G train," Bea shot back, clutching her purse tight to her chest. "Move." From the dark interior of the SUV, Maximilian's voice drifted out, smooth and lethal. "Get in the car, Bea, or I'll have Carlo throw you in the trunk. It's raining, and my patience is thin." Bea weighed her options. Scream and get shot on the sidewalk, or get in the car and see what this psychopath wanted. Scowling, she pushed past Carlo and hoisted her heavy frame into the luxurious leather interior of the Escalade. The door slammed shut, sealing her in a silent, temperature-controlled bubble that smelled of rich leather and Maximilian's intoxicating cologne. He was sitting in the corner, nursing a crystal tumbler of amber liquid from a small wet bar. He looked even more dangerous up close, the dim streetlights occasionally illuminating the sharp, ruthless angles of his jaw. "Drink?" he offered, swirling his glass. "I don't drink with mobsters," Bea snapped, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to ignore how fast her heart was beating. "Are you going to kill me or what? Because I have to visit my mother tomorrow, and I need to cancel if I'm going to be at the bottom of the East River." Maximilian actually smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful sight. "You really don't fear anything, do you? A woman your size, living paycheck to paycheck, threatening the underboss of the Rossetti Syndicate. It's fascinating." "My size?" Bea bristled, her eyes narrowing. "Is that what this is? A freak show for you? You want to mock the fat girl before you put a bullet in her?" Maximilian's expression darkened instantly. He leaned forward, the amusement vanishing. "Never say that. I don't mock you, Adelaide. Quite the opposite. In my world, everyone cowers. Everyone lies. Skinny, beautiful women throw themselves at my feet for a scrap of my money, and tough men piss themselves when I walk in the room. But you stood there, 280 pounds of absolute fury, and you offered to butcher me like a pig." He leaned back, taking a slow sip of his drink. "It was the most honest thing I've experienced in a decade." Bea stared at him, bewildered. "So you kidnapped me to give me a compliment?" "I didn't kidnap you. I'm giving you a promotion," Maximilian said calmly. He reached into his suit jacket and tossed a thick manila envelope onto Bee's lap. "What is this?" "The deed to Gina's all-day breakfast," Maximilian said. "Gina was very eager to sell when I offered her 3 times the market value. She's moving to Florida. You are now the sole owner and manager." Bee's jaw dropped. She stared at the envelope, then at Maximilian. "You bought my diner. Why?" "Because I need a front," Maximilian said, his tone shifting from amused to deadly serious. "The Moretti family is moving in on my territory. They're watching my warehouses, my clubs, my casinos. I need a place to conduct private business, a place to hold certain sensitive items. A rundown diner run by a heavy, invisible waitress is the last place anyone will look. You're a ghost to them, Adelaide. Society ignores women like you. That makes you incredibly valuable to me." The insult wrapped in a compliment stung, but the undeniable truth of it hit Bee hard. She was invisible to most people. To society, she was just the fat girl pouring coffee. "And if I say no?" Bea asked quietly. "You won't," Maximilian replied smoothly. "Because I know about your mother's medical bills. I know about your crippling debt. You run the diner. You hold my packages when I drop them off. You ask no questions. In return, you get the profits of the diner, and I deposit $10,000 a month into an offshore account for you." Bee's mind spun. 10,000 a month. It was life-changing money. It meant her mother wouldn't be kicked out of her facility. It meant Bea could finally afford a life. But the cost was tying herself to a monster. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice wavering for the first time. "You could just use me and kill me when you're done." Maximilian reached across the wide console. His large, calloused hand gently wrapped around Bee's thick wrist. His touch sent a bizarre, electric shock straight up her arm. He pulled her slightly closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "Because, Adelaide," he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I want you alive, and I want you exactly as you are. Fierce, unyielding." He released her wrist, though his eyes never left hers, "and heavy enough to throw her weight around when necessary." The car rolled to a smooth stop. Bea looked out the window. They were parked directly in front of her apartment building. "You start as owner tomorrow," Maximilian said, turning his attention back to his drink. "Don't disappoint me." Bea grabbed the envelope and practically scrambled out of the SUV, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She stood on the wet pavement, clutching the deed to the diner as the Escalade pulled away, disappearing into the rainy New York night. She had just made a deal with the devil. But as she looked down at the thick envelope in her hands, Adelaide realized something terrifying. She wasn't entirely sure she wanted to run away. The game had just begun, and the fat waitress was holding the board. The transition from exhausted employee to business owner happened overnight, but Adelaide didn't change her uniform. She still wore the pink dress, still tied her thick hair back with a cheap elastic, and still worked the graveyard shift. The only difference was that now, when the supplier from Cisco tried to overcharge her for frozen hash browns, she slammed the invoice on the counter and threatened to take her business to Arthur Pendleton's wholesale down the street. For the first 3 weeks, the packages Maximilian mentioned didn't arrive. Instead, Maximilian did. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 a.m., always flanked by Carlo and another massive enforcer named Tommy. Maximilian would sit in his usual ripped leather booth, order a black coffee and a rare steak, and watch her. They rarely spoke more than a few sentences, but the air between them crackled with an unspoken heavy tension. He watched the way she moved, unapologetically taking up space, barking orders at the new fry cook, Thomas, and effortlessly hauling 50-pound sacks of flour from the delivery truck to the pantry. To the rest of Hell's Kitchen, she was just Bea, the heavy-set, loud-mouthed diner owner. To Maximilian, she was the safest vault in New York City. The illusion shattered on a freezing Friday night in late November. Maximilian hadn't shown up for his usual Thursday visit. Instead, at 3:15 a.m., the diner door swung open and Carlo walked in alone. He looked pale, sweating despite the chill, and he was clutching a nondescript, heavily taped cardboard box. "Put this in the back," Carlo muttered, his eyes darting toward the front windows. "Bottom of the deep freeze. Do not open it." Bea wiped her hands on her apron, taking the box. It was surprisingly light. "Where's Maximilian?" "Busy," Carlo snapped. "Just do it, Adelaide." She carried the box into the walk-in freezer, burying it under a stack of frozen beef patties. But as she walked back out to the kitchen, her instincts flared. Something was wrong. Carlo had been with Maximilian during the coffee spilling incident. He was usually arrogant, cruel, and painfully loyal. Tonight, he looked like a rabbit caught in a snare. An hour later, the diner bell chimed. 3 men walked in. They weren't Maximilian's men. They wore cheap leather jackets, and they didn't bother pretending to be customers. The man in the front was Lorenzo Moretti, the nephew of the rival syndicate's boss. He was lean, overly cologned, and had a nasty scar running through his left eyebrow. "We're closed," Bea said loudly, stepping out from behind the counter. She crossed her thick arms, planting her feet. Lorenzo smirked, looking her up and down with obvious disgust. "I don't want a burger, sweetheart. I want the box Rossetti's dog dropped off here an hour ago." Bea didn't blink. "I don't know what you're talking about. The only boxes I get are from my produce guy, and unless you want a crate of bruised tomatoes, you need to get out of my diner." Lorenzo pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket, pointing it squarely at Bea's broad chest. "Listen to me, you fat cow. I know it's here. Hand over the drives, and maybe I'll let you live to see breakfast." For a split second, fear iced Bea's veins. These weren't men she could intimidate with a steak knife. But then the old familiar rage bubbled up. Fat cow. It was always the same insult. "You want to look?" Bea asked, her voice dangerously calm. She took a step back, gesturing toward the swinging kitchen doors. "Be my guest. It's in the back." Lorenzo nodded to his 2 men. "Watch the door." He kept his gun leveled at Bea and followed her into the narrow, greasy kitchen. "Where?" he barked. Bea walked toward the deep fryers. The oil had been bubbling at 350 degrees for the last 6 hours. "In the pantry," she pointed past the fryers, positioning herself perfectly between Lorenzo and the exit. As Lorenzo stepped past her, his eyes focused on the pantry door, Bea didn't hesitate. She didn't have a gun, but she had 280 pounds of solid mass and a lifetime of pent-up aggression. She threw her entire body weight into Lorenzo's side. The impact was like a freight train hitting a bicycle. Lorenzo gasped as his ribs cracked under her weight. He flew sideways, his gun clattering across the slick tile floor. Before he could recover, Bea grabbed the heavy metal handle of the fry basket, pulled it from the boiling oil, and swung it. A shower of scalding, 350-degree grease sprayed across Lorenzo's face and chest. His screams were deafening. He thrashed on the floor, clawing at his burning skin. Hearing the screams, the two men in the front rushed the kitchen doors. Bea was already moving. She grabbed the fire extinguisher off the wall, pulled the pin, and as the doors swung open, she blasted a blinding cloud of white chemical foam directly into their faces. Coughing and blinded, the men stumbled backward. Suddenly, the front windows of the diner shattered under a hail of gunfire. Bea dropped to the floor, covering her head as glass and cheap laminate rained down. The deafening roar of automatic weapons tore through the diner. It lasted for 10 agonizing seconds before dead silence fell. "Adelaide!" The voice was rough, panicked. "Maximilian." Bea crawled out from the kitchen, covered in fire-retardant powder and grease. Maximilian was standing in the ruined diner, a smoking assault rifle in his hands. His men were dragging the bodies of Lorenzo's enforcers out the door. Maximilian dropped the rifle and rushed over, grabbing Bea by the shoulders and hauling her to her feet. His dark eyes frantically scanned her body for bullet holes. "Are you hit? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," she coughed, brushing powder off her apron. She pointed a thick finger toward the kitchen. "Lorenzo Moretti is in there. He's a little crispy." Maximilian stared at her, then walked to the kitchen doors. He looked down at the whimpering, severely burned mobster on the floor. When Maximilian turned back to Bea, the look of pure, unadulterated awe on his face was unmistakable. "You took down Lorenzo Moretti with a fry basket," Maximilian whispered. "He called me a fat cow," Bea said, adjusting her crooked name tag. "I told you what happens when people disrespect me." Maximilian actually laughed, a real, genuine sound that echoed in the destroyed diner. But the smile faded quickly. "Carlo sold us out. That box he brought you. It's a decoy. The real ledger is safe, but Carlo tipped off the Morettis, hoping they'd raid this place and kill you, tying up loose ends while he made off with my money." Bea's eyes widened. "Carlo set me up?" "He underestimated you," Maximilian said, stepping closer. "We all did, except me." He reached out, his thumb gently wiping a streak of soot off her cheek. The touch was intimate, startlingly tender amidst the blood and broken glass. "I knew from the moment you threatened me with that steak knife that you were different, Adelaide. You don't hide. You don't break. You are the strongest woman I have ever met." Bea swallowed hard, looking up into his dark, intense eyes. "So what happens now? My diner is destroyed." "It's not your diner anymore," Maximilian murmured, stepping so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "It's a liability. But you are an asset. Carlo is dead. I handled him on the way here. I need someone by my side who isn't afraid of the monsters in the dark. Someone who can stand her ground." "You want me in the mafia?" Bea asked, a wry, disbelieving smile touching her lips. "I don't know how to shoot a gun, Maximilian." "You won't need to," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper as his hands slid down to grip her wide waist, pulling her flush against him. "You just need to keep being exactly who you are. My queen." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, polite kiss. It was bruising, demanding, and tasted of adrenaline and danger. Bea's hands, still trembling slightly, reached up to grip the lapels of his ruined suit. She kissed him back with all the fierce, unyielding passion that society had told her she wasn't allowed to have. When they finally broke apart, the sirens were wailing in the distance. The police were coming. "We need to go," Maximilian said, keeping one arm firmly wrapped around her waist. Adelaide looked back at the ruined diner, the place where she had been invisible, overworked, and disrespected for years. Then she looked at the feared mafia boss, who was holding her like she was the most precious, powerful thing in the world. She wasn't the fat waitress anymore. "Let's go," Bea said, stepping over the shattered glass, her head held high. She walked out into the neon-lit New York night, leaving the pink uniform behind forever. The game was over, and the Queen had taken the board. If you were shocked by Adelaide's ultimate stand and how she completely flipped the script on the city's most dangerous mafia boss, you are not alone. Her transition from an overworked waitress to an unyielding mafia queen proves that true power comes from owning exactly who you are. Did you love this explosive twist? Hit that like button, share this incredible story with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life drama stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done?